All right, folks. So today I'm going to talk about the historical method or the historical methodology. Again, try to demystify what is in many ways a rather complex set of ideas that guide the way historians do what they do. I'm going to go further with this in a webinar in the future, in large part, because some of these things need further explanation. So consider this really a Cliff Notes version, if you will, of historical method or methodology. One of the best ways to consider the historical method is to talk about what history is and what it ain't. And it's definitely not record. History is not record. History is made. I talked a bit about this in the previous video about historiography. History is made up of records, but history is also narrative. Historians are storytellers. These narratives attempt to analyze and explain the past based on various types of records. More broadly, history is an attempt to reconstruct and interpret actual events and previous lived experiences. It follows rules of evidence, is evaluated by experts, and then experts debate the legitimacy of the story in question. I think when dealing with narratives also, it's essential that historians use certain procedures to ensure that the story they are telling is reliable. The believability of narratives is how human beings make sense of the world. One of the first ways, for instance, we teach children about morality is through storytelling. Fables and these types of stories have become essential to the ways we familiarize young people with morals and standards and ethics. So in some ways, the power of narrative matters. It matters in terms of human understanding, and there are rules for historians that guide this process. If a historian fails to use sources objectively or only seeks out sources that corroborate their interpretation of the past, we are drifting from history toward mythology. And I think it's critical that we understand those distinctions, in large part because it comes down to evidence. Evidence-based discovery, especially in an age where truth is up for grabs, still matters, especially now. And history really is an interpretive negotiation of the past, or the historian's negotiation between what happened and what the sources say. It measures the rate at which things change or which they stay the same at its most fundamental level. The process of history and the measurement of evidence is a measurement of continuity and change. Historians analyze the past by collecting, organizing, interpreting, recollecting, reorganizing, reinterpreting evidence about historical actors and their actions. Evidence is a historical source that supports or refutes an argument or a thesis, a hypothesis. I think that this drove history. What does the evidence say? That's what a historian might do. Historical research methods are concerned with the collecting of information from primary and secondary sources. These sources can be primary sources from the time, such as written, non-written. Non-written we refer to as oral tradition, by the way, which for a very long time, especially in the 20th century, oral traditions weren't necessarily considered legitimate historical sources. Africanists in the Western world were the first really to go through a methodological process to legitimize the use of oral traditions in telling a story about the past. So now they're respected sources, and that is a dilemma in historical methodology, is trying to come to terms with what is and what is not a legitimate source. Visual and physical evidence from that time are also primary materials. Evidence can also be interpretive sources, of course, what experts have said about the past in question. You can think about this in terms of the conversation I had previously about historiography. This gets us down fundamentally to historical method. And historical method really is a technique that guides historians in the gathering, interpreting, and verification of evidence. It also guides historians on writing about the past in an ethical manner. At its most fundamental level, historical methodology and historical method is concerned about doing things ethically, about retelling a story ethically. And these ethical considerations almost always concern the reliability of sources. Are these sources reliable? And do they help us come to a better understanding of what the historian is trying to convey? Historians measure the quality of their work In fact, by measuring. First, or not just first, but one element is the legitimacy of sources. It's called source criticism. It measures the reliability of sources by looking at a source's origins, its originality, its motivations, its interpretations. And then there are the historians' procedures, and this is often a measurement of authority and authenticity. Do the sources agree about the matter in question? If not, who's the authority in this disagreement? This might go on for a long time. This isn't something that a historian will do once, but multiple times. And there's another way that we measure the quality of work. It's thesis vetting. Is the argument based on evidence, sound interpretation, strong consideration of secondary sources or the historiography? All of these things must be considered when we're thinking about the reliability of the historian and the story the historian is trying to convey. Which gets us to the fundamental dilemma in evidence versus advertisement. It's also historians' duty when analyzing sources and writing about them to negotiate the distinction between propaganda and proper evidence, especially true for secondary sources. Peer reviews matter. And this isn't, by the way, specific to history. You see this in the scientific method. You see this throughout the humanities. You see this throughout the sciences. This is, in fact, the ways that experts build a canon. Have other experts vetted the work? By experts, we generally mean people who have been trained officially in matters of history and its methodology, people who know and have thought considerably about the process of writing history. There are historians, by the way, who have dedicated their entire careers to thinking just about these matters. Does the material present alternative viewpoints is a question historians might ask. Does it support stated claims with legitimate evidence? Does it engage in historiography and things of that nature? They might also ask, when thinking about what's the distinction between advertisement and evidence, is to what degree is the material in question saturated by interpretations that disregard professional standards? Has the hypothesis been tested with recourse to the sources? Is there an axe to grind without consideration for these sources, etc.? So in thinking about this, in summation, the aim of historical method and methodology is to ensure interpretive and reliable accuracy in the writing of history. It is something that is given, again, serious consideration. These techniques ensure that historians and the arguments they make have seriously considered the nature of the evidence in question. Thank you.